The San Jose Sharks have actually won a hockey game, plus the New York Islanders are on a roll. And are throwback jerseys good for these relocated teams? All that and the 3 games to watch this weekend on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday, everyone, and thanks for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner from Locked On Flyers. I'm here each and every Friday with Gil Martin of Locked On Islanders. You can find us on YouTube or anywhere you listen to podcasts to get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. How are we doing this Friday, Gil?
We are doing it. It is fall. It is Halloween.
Crisp.
Right around the corner. Yeah, crisp air outside. It's nice. And I think we're really getting into the swing of the season now.
We are. And, we were joking offline ahead of planning today's show about, are we going to get a chance to talk about the remaining winless team in the NHL? But no more. The San Jose Sharks were victorious over the New York Rangers, 6-5 in overtime, with Will Smith getting that goal. And I think, the question here is, are the expectations for the San Jose Sharks still in the basement, right? And that this will be a one-off win, then they'll lose a bunch more games and maybe win a game here and there. And what does that do for these young players?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I did get to watch the Sharks. They played the Islanders earlier in the week. There is talent on this team. This is not a team that lacks talent, top to bottom on their roster. The question is, how soon will they mature? How quickly will they adjust to playing in the NHL against adults, against bigger, faster players with higher hockey IQs? And for me, I don't think it was realistic to expect the Sharks to make the playoffs this year, but are they playing better hockey in March and early April than they were in October and November? If they're a 500 team or better for the last 20 games of the season, I think that's a step forward.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point about looking at the course of the season for this team and how they mature, because I think you're right that, with some of the younger guys coming in, especially like Michael Misa, who's played very well so far. I think, he has the most difficult transition to make of any of the younger players. Obviously, like Celebrini and Smith have, a little bit more experience there. But I do think Michael Misa is, adjusting pretty well thus far. And I think that the fact that these guys are all going to mature together is going to help this team in the long run. And I think you're right. Let's look at the last 20 games of this season and see where they're at. And that'll be the true test of this team. And where they are in the standings doesn't really matter as much, because it's about building chemistry for success over the long term.
Right. The two things you want to do, like you said, build chemistry for the long term. And then you have to weed out who's going to be a player and who's not going to make
who's part of it and who's not.
Right. Who's on board and who you have to put aside, trade, or bring them back to the minors or whatever you need to do, because not all of these younger players are going to meet expectations ultimately. So it's a process. And if you're a Sharks fan, it's been a long process.
Right.
But I like the way they're going about this. I think as difficult and painful as a full rebuild can be, I think that Mike Grier and the Sharks are doing it the right way. And if it works, if they get enough of these young players to reach their potential, they could be good for a long, long time if they all do mature together.
Yeah, and that game against the Rangers, I think, is a little nugget of what we can expect more of down the road from this team. And you look, Celebrini with 5 points, Will Smith, who's my personal favorite on the team, is with 4 points, and William Eklund, 3 key assists in that game. And I just think it's going to be critical for these guys to kind of bring this team forward as a group, like we've been talking about. Now, I think with your New York Islanders, it's a little bit of a different scenario here, where you kind of have one young player who's galvanizing the whole team, where it was a really rough start, but Matthew Schaefer has been playing excellent hockey and really showing that he did deserve to make the NHL in his first season. And he's contributing and in some ways, leading the effort here.
Yeah, he's galvanized this team, and which is amazing to say about a kid who just turned 18 a month ago.
Yeah.
And a couple of things. Number one, last night against Detroit, game the Islanders won 7-2, was the first time in 7 games that Matthew Schaefer did not record a point. And yet it was one of his better games.
Ironic, right?
Yeah, well, yeah. But the other thing that stood out to me at the end of the game, one of the Red Wings delivered a heavy hit. I'm not going to say it was a dirty hit, but it was a heavy hit to Schaefer just as the time expired. And to see all 4 other skaters on the ice converge on that player to send the message, you don't mess around with our kid here. Something the Islanders did not do very well a year ago. That told me that in just 7 games, this kid earned the respect of his teammates to the point where all of them converged on this guy to send a message, which, to me, that speaks volumes about what he means to this team in such a short time.
Yeah, it is really fascinating to watch. I gotta say, in terms of having, this group of young players in the Sharks versus a single player with the Islanders having a similar effect on a team, but in a different way. Now the Islanders are winning because they have some veteran players to support it that are executing. And like you said, 7 goals in a game, almost unheard of from the Islanders, but they managed to pull it off in this one. The other question I have about the Islanders, and is this sustainable for them, is the goaltending. And, as we know, the Islanders fired their goalie coach, in the last week. And, Sorokin has been struggling. And with the injury situations, he's kind of it right now for the Islanders. And how do you see that firing in particular, and what Sorokin's job is moving forward now?
It's interesting. Look, I can't say that Ilya Sorokin has played well this season. He had his best game against the Sharks, but it was his best game because he didn't let in any soft goals, which was, something
pretty typical for him.
Right? Yeah, it's plagued him this year. And look, the goaltending coach, the new goalie coach, is someone who worked with him in the KHL when his stats were off the charts. They know each other. I get it to a point. But I think the bigger issue for the Islanders, look, the goalie coach can help Sorokin work on a couple of his angles or his mechanics a little bit, and it probably does need tweaking. But I think the bigger issue is team defense. The Islanders have given up more high danger chances than any other team in the league, according to all of those lovely metrics that that websites project. And if you take it with a grain of salt or not, the bottom line is no goalie is going to have great numbers if they're facing the highest number of high danger chances. So I think the bigger issue is with the system that Patrick Waugh wants to run, which is more offensive oriented and speed oriented. And I wonder, you ask if it's sustainable. I don't know if the Islanders have the horses to run that kind of a system and still play good enough defense to keep the games close.
Yeah, I think that'll be key. And, that high danger stat, I knew just because, again, the Flyers are the next opponent for the New York Islanders in an afternoon game, which never goes well for the Flyers. But that being said, I think that's going to be a real interesting aspect of that matchup there because of the Flyers' like lack of shots so far. So I think, who's ever in net for the Islanders is going to have a slightly easier task this time around. But, it'll be interesting to see what regular season Matthew Schaefer and this Islanders team looks like versus the preseason version, which is what we've seen so far from the Flyers perspective. But for both these teams, again, really, really interesting time of the year for both of them. And we'll see if the Sharks can get more than one win over the next couple of weeks as well. In the meantime, we did see a throwback game between the Carolina Hurricanes and the Colorado Avalanche, or was it based on the jerseys? We're going to talk about if the throwback jerseys are a good thing or not coming up next.
Today's episode is brought to you by Rougiette. Let's be real, making excuses doesn't solve anything. We've heard them all before. It's just stress. I'm tired, or it happens to everyone sometimes. But when it comes to performance, sometimes your body just needs a little extra support, and that's where Rougiette comes in. Rougiette.com offers a fast-acting, doctor-prescribed treatment for ED designed to help you stop making excuses and start making moves. Rougiette makes it easy to get started. You just connect with a board-certified doctor 100% online. No awkward waiting rooms, no in-person appointments. If prescribed, your treatment ships discreetly straight to your door. The process is fast, simple, and private, and it's all handled by real doctors. It's about confidence, connection, and getting back to the moments that matter. Visit rugiet.com/LockedOnNHL to get 15% off your first order. That's rugiet.com/LockedOnNHL. And don't forget to use our code LockedOnNHL so they know we sent you. Rougiette, stop making excuses and start making moves.
Hockey season is here and nothing beats being in the arena for those opening games. But let's be real, getting tickets can be a total headache between waiting in online queues, surprise fees, and dynamic pricing jumps right before checkout. It's easy to get frustrated when all you want to do is cheer on your team. And that's where Gametime comes in. It's the app that gives fans the advantage. It's your ultimate life hack for scoring amazing NHL tickets fast, easy, and stress-free. One of my favorite features of the app is you can see exactly what your seat view is going to look like before you buy the tickets with that in-app feature. Plus, the zone deals are a game changer where you pick the section, Gametime picks your exact seats, and then you save big. You can even find NHL tickets for under $25. I actually recently used Gametime to grab seats for the Lord concert at MSG. Could not have been simpler, and I had great seats in minutes. So take the guesswork out of buying NHL tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LockedOnNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. That's code LockedOnNHL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. All right, so last night, the Carolina Hurricanes faced the Colorado Avalanche. Carolina won that game in a shootout. And I think, the results of the game aside, I was really angry watching that game. And I have a definite opinion that those throwback jerseys are not a good thing. And we saw the Carolina Hurricanes wear the Hartford Whalers jerseys while the Colorado Avalanche wore Quebec Nordiques jerseys. And while I love both of those jerseys very, very much, I just find it to be somewhat insulting and mean to the cities that those teams used to represent before relocation. And it's just, I think it's cruel to those fans to do it. And at the same time, it's a cash grab by the NHL and those teams. It's basically just to sell those throwback jerseys. And I do not want to see a Svechnikov Whalers jersey. Svechnikov never played for the Hartford Whalers. If I'm going to buy a Hartford Whalers jersey, it's going to be Lindsey Carson. And that's just what it is, because he's my favorite player to ever have worn the Hartford Whalers jersey. And I just don't like it. And I wish they would stop doing it.
Fair enough. I have to disagree. I'll agree with the cash grab part. That I think it definitely is. But so are third jerseys, which I think are completely unnecessary. It's just like, hey, here's a different thing you can buy it. You know, that kind of a thing. So yeah, I'll give you that. But I don't find it an insult to the cities where and the fans for the former Whalers and Nordique fans. I think it's an homage to those teams and to those fans. And yes, if I were buying a Hartford Whalers jersey, I'm getting Gordie Howe or Blaine Stoughton or Mike Rogers. I'm not going with one of the newer players. And I love both of the jerseys of those teams. But to me, look, I'm a history guy. So I respect and appreciate the history of the sport, the history of the franchises. And I think on a certain level for younger fans who never saw the Quebec Nordiques or the Hartford Whalers, that they could, be introduced to a little bit more about the history of the franchises that they root for, and to know a little bit about the origins. And for these two teams in particular, two WHA original franchises, it adds even more of an element to it, because there's only one original WHA franchise that is still the original franchise in its original location, and that's the Oilers.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I get that to some degree. I just think there's other ways to introduce that history, and there's other ways to honor those teams. And I would say, I don't presume to speak for the people of Quebec City. However, that city has been strung along over these decades since the Nordiques left and went to Colorado. And when they left and went to Colorado and then to immediately win a Stanley Cup, like, that's painful. That is painful history. And I think to say, oh, we're going to wear your jersey, but you never got to celebrate the Stanley Cup proper in the year afterwards. And I think, and again, the fact that they've been strung along with expansion over these decades, since the Nordiques left, it feels wrong to me. It just feels wrong, and it feels unnecessarily mean to the Quebec City as a fan base. And especially, I think, Hartford was a slightly different scenario for the move, obviously. But again, Carolina did wind up winning a Stanley Cup. Now it was a few more years for sure after the relocation. So it's not the same situation, but I think that it's it just feels wrong. And to me, especially with the fact that, Connecticut has not seen a team, and other than at the minor league level since then. And, at least like there's Montreal in the province of Quebec, but
that's their
it's
biggest
different.
rival if you go back.
I know.
Right? I mean, Quebec and Montreal, some of those playoff series were epic, and the rivalry for Le Belle Provence was fantastic. It was one of the better rivalries in the league at the time. So
yeah,
I mean,
so have a different NHL event in those cities and honor the past of those teams. I think there's a better way to do it. You can do the same thing in Atlanta if you wanted to help build excitement for whatever expansion they're looking to do, right? Is honor the history.
See, to me, that's the ultimate answer, because Quebec City should get a team back. I mean, you want to honor the fans, but the issue in Quebec has always been, and I'll put it in air quotes, corporate support, right? Size of the market and corporate support. And let's be honest, and I'm not saying it's right, but Gary Bettman is not thrilled with putting teams in Canada. I wish it wasn't the fact, but that's the way it kind of is.
Yeah. I mean, I understand all of that. I just still it rubbed me the wrong way seeing those jerseys on TV. And especially, I know this is like a weird aspect of it, but it's been so long since those two teams played that like high definition TV wasn't even a thing. And so to see those jerseys in crisp color just felt totally wrong to me. I'm used to seeing them in like grainy, like washed out hues.
VCR copies on YouTube. Yeah, I get it.
So that just felt wrong on a whole other level.
Yeah, no, I hear you. But, again, to me, bringing it to life, quote unquote, and to have fans get to see those jerseys, and they are great jerseys. Both of those jerseys are great
They
jerseys.
are like, and I own a Nordiques jersey. Like, I love it. I
Yeah.
absolutely love it. But
No, look, yeah, I mean, the very first game I was in a press box was in Hartford. I mean, I have a very big connection to that aspect of the history, and yeah, it to me it's a warm fuzzy feeling, even if it is a little weird. I'll give you seeing those jerseys again. I think the best way to honor those teams, especially Quebec, would be to give them an expansion team. If you're putting 4 expansion teams in, Quebec City has to be one of the 4.
I mean, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think that there has to be at least one of the next expansion teams should be in Canada, like without a
Yeah.
doubt.
Yeah, and
But
I guess to me, honoring the heritage of these franchises for what 3 or 4 games a year, if that, I have no problem with that.
yeah, it just felt wrong to me. It felt weird and gross and wrong. And I don't want to see a shiny new Quebec Nordiques jersey. I want to see an old one that's worn with a
Michel
player who,
Goulet lives.
yes, with an actual
And the
player.
Stastny brothers, yes.
Those were the days. Those were the days for sure. All right. Well, we have to fast forward back to modern day hockey and look ahead to this weekend's slate of games. And what are the top 3 games we're looking forward to? We will talk about them coming up next.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love how FanDuel gives me so many ways to play. I built parlays to increase my odds. I've tried player props, and I've even followed the live lines during games. It makes watching football even more exciting when you've got a little something riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Place that first $5 bet, and if it wins, you get $300 in bonus bets. Visit FanDuel.com. Check it out today.
All right, there's some really good games going on this weekend. After that full slate of games last night, looking forward to a whole bunch more this weekend. I can say that one game that probably won't get a lot of eyes on it for sure is the Leafs at Sabres game. I think Toronto sports fans are going to be otherwise occupied. That's for sure.
Yeah, you would think, on paper, that's a good game, pretty good rivalry, division matchup, but Toronto fans will be occupado tonight.
Yeah, and I'll be interested to see what the arena looks like, because normally Leafs fans would invade Buffalo, right, and
Right.
take over the arena, but, they're going to either be at home or at the bar or something like that, watching a different game, I am sure. So the games that we do, in fact, think that you should watch, the first one, the Columbus Blue Jackets at the Pittsburgh Penguins. And I think, when you're looking at that game, it may not seem like something you would want to check out on first glance. And that game is, of course, on Saturday evening. But the Pittsburgh Penguins have quietly been a surprising team. And I think if you haven't had a chance to check them out yet and try and see why that's the case and how they're winning, this is a good opportunity for you to do that.
Yeah, and I'm still not sure they're going to be able to keep this pace up. 6-2, I think, is way above any. If you would have asked,
punching above their weight. So,
yeah, I mean, if
as
you would
they
have asked
say,
the players themselves in the first 8 games, what do you think your record will be? I don't know if any of them thought they'd be 6-2. That being said, they are off to a really good start. This is a home game, a division game, and Columbus, they're trying to find themselves. They're 3-3. They're kind of, really solid one game and kind of struggling the next. And did anyone expect that every team in the Metro would be really close to 500? I mean, the Rangers are the only team below NHL 500 right now.
Yeah, they have their own problems. But yeah, I do think, you look at the Blue Jackets and they're a team that I think was supposed to take a step forward this year. We've talked about that in the past here. And I think this was the year that kind of the Blue Jackets were going to leapfrog the Pens in sort of the Metro Division tiers of teams here. And so that's why this particular matchup is a good one, because I think the Pens have a chance to win. They're going to be at home, but this is a chance for the Blue Jackets to be like, nah, I don't know if this thing is for real, Pittsburgh, and geographic rivals and all of that too. Now, for the late game, my recommendation is Oilers at Kraken. The Seattle Kraken have been one of the other big surprising teams of the season so far. And I think when you look at what they've been able to accomplish, it's been interesting for sure in terms of their offensive output. I think defensively, they've still struggled a little bit, but managed to pull out a lot of the wins. And the Oilers have been good, but uneven on the offensive side of things.
Yeah, and you would expect that to be the other way around. The defense would be the more uneven thing. Their defense is quietly pretty darn good. But yeah, I am surprised at the unevenness of the Oilers' performance. I did see them play the Islanders earlier this season, and there does seem to be a little something missing from this team right now. I'm not worried about them long term, but they've gotten off to slow starts before, right?
Oh, absolutely. And, obviously we've always talked about the goaltending with Edmonton, and whether I think so goes the goaltending, so goes the Oilers in a lot of
Right.
ways, because they can score all they want with that high powered offense. But if the goaltending isn't there and if the defense isn't there, then that's where they've struggled. Now, that being said, of course, we know they made the Stanley Cup final the last 2 years. So they've managed to at least be successful when it counted to an extent. But that's why I think, you have this team that's supposed to be good against a team that's surprisingly good. Again, a really interesting matchup. And I want to see what the Seattle Kraken can do defensively against this Edmonton Oilers offense for sure. The other game that I would suggest checking out on Sunday is the Utah Mammoth at the Winnipeg Jets. And I think Utah was a team that a lot of people said was going to take a step forward. They have a lot of really good young players here, and they have been executing on that. And Clayton Keller in particular is having a remarkable season thus far. And the Winnipeg Jets are just doing their thing with great goaltending and just solid play overall. And so this is a really good contest for Utah, I think.
Yeah, it's a road game as well, a division game. This one's going to be fun, and we're going to start to see whether or not they're improved. There's no doubt, but how good are they? Winnipeg, the team that won the President's Trophy a year ago, that arguably has the best goalie in the NHL. That's a great road test for the Utah Mammoth.
Yeah, and one of the big aspects of this game is the fact that the Winnipeg Jets are pretty much unbeatable on the penalty kill here.
Yeah.
They have a 96.4% PK to start the season. Like, who does that? That's crazy. But I think that is going to be a challenge for sure. And I think, it gives Winnipeg some confidence when they do take a penalty that they're going to be okay. And can Utah take advantage of those situations and maybe, put a crack in the armor of that penalty kill?
Won't be easy, but that's the challenge. And let's see what Clayton Keller and company can do.
Yeah, because, on average, at least so far, they've been scoring a little bit more per game than Winnipeg has been able to. But of course, they have that stellar goaltending on the other side. So, yeah, I absolutely love this matchup. And I'm very excited to see this game on Sunday. But there are so many other games to choose from and so many storylines that will come out of that. And Gil, you will be back on Monday to talk to three hosts from the Locked On NHL channel about what's going on with their team should big stories or big games arise over the weekend. I will be back tomorrow with Erica Ayala on the Women's Hockey Report, and there's some big stuff going on in the PWHL. Excited to talk about that. And we'll be back next Friday to talk about the week that was in the NHL. Thanks for listening to the Locked On NHL podcast. For your next listen, check out Locked On NHL Game Night on this very channel. It's every game, every night until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. You can get local analysis on a national scale with Locked On NHL and NHL Game Night. It's on YouTube or wherever you find your podcasts. Have a great weekend, everyone.